All right, welcome back to Resilient Voices and Beyond. I'm excited to have another episode. I believe this is episode 39. It has been a long road. I was watching some of the posts that I've posted on Facebook and everything like that, and someone there very close to me was like, wow, it's only been like 3 months and you have 38 episodes. And for me, it's like I can't fathom. I've just been trying to do this and get the stories out there and capture people's experience for the betterment of the system as a whole and just being able to tell their truths. And it's crazy to me, but there's a lot more out there. But I'm excited because I have a very special person that's wonderful. I think she's all out great. I've had the opportunity to talk to her before this and also, get a sense of what her work is. Without further ado, I'm going to have her introduce herself because I can talk forever. Go ahead.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Michael, and congratulations on 39 episodes. That is amazing. Amazing stuff. Well, my name is Alisa Matheson, and I did have the pleasure of speaking with Michael and hearing a little bit about this podcast, and I was excited to share about myself. I am an adoptive mom. I was a foster mom for about 5 years, and now I'm in the process of launching a new nonprofit in the foster care and adoption space, trying to kind of fill in a gap that I have seen in the system of really honoring young people's stories and their histories and medical history. And so we are based in Minnesota. The organization is called Power of Story, and it's really putting together histories for young people, but also advocating for the power of those stories and medical history and information to be in young people's hands at the time when they're in care and beyond. So I'm really excited to be here. It's been a fun and complicated process in getting to this point, but I'm excited to talk with you today, Michael.
Definitely. Wow. Oh, my mind is going with so many questions. I'm gonna have to put myself back so we can get all of that on we can. So first off, I want to get a sense of how did this journey begin for yourself? Like, when did it start? And just go from there.
Right. I feel like so many times in life, you kind of look back and like, where did this journey begin? And I can go all the way back to like my own early 20s, before foster care was part of my vocabulary, before I was a foster parent. When I was in my mid-20s, I was looking at my own childhood. And I realized that I, as a person who did not experience foster care, as someone who was not adopted, still had this really kind of episodic memory. It wasn't very chronological. It wasn't understandable. I'd be like, I don't know what happened between this age and this age. And so I kind of did my own little mini life book and social medical history process as an individual before any of this. And I sat down with some of my family and friends and said, what can you tell me about myself as a kid? What was I like when I was 5 and 10 and 15? All I remember is I had crazy ADHD, and I would run away from home every other week. And I was a pretty unhappy kid. And so it was interesting to hear other people's perspectives on my childhood and then try to fit those together. It was a project I did on my own outside of school. I called it Mapping the Ocean, and took pictures from my own childhood and took stories that I remembered, stories that other people told me, and put them together to kind of create a coherent narrative for myself. And I found it really healing emotionally. I found it really just impactful as a human to piece together those parts of my history. And then as I came in, I became a foster mom when I was 30. And, we were given kind of little bits and pieces of life book information. So it's good to have, kids when they move on from your home to have pictures and stories from your home. And I just dug right into that. I got so impassioned to say, what are the things that kiddos are going to want to know about their time with me? And what are they going to want to know about what I know about their birth family, about their story, about why they came to live with me. As a foster parent, you kind of have this really interesting piece in the process to talk to birth parents and to take care of kids and put them to bed that first night they're in your care. And you have information to share. And so I put together life books for kids that were in my home, and did all of the conversations and gathering of photos and all of that, and sent them on with foster kiddos that I took care of, and have heard from them as they've grown and started contacting me that they still have them and still resource, go back to them, say, these are some of the only pictures I have with my birth family are the ones when I was with you and you sent cameras to visits and things like that. So the hands-on piece. And then I moved out of direct foster care and into the professional world of adoption and foster care. And I worked with older youth who were aging out of the foster care system, who had an abysmally tiny amount of information about their own lives. Most of the youth I worked with had no idea where they had lived previously. They're like, I lived in like 10 placements. I can maybe remember 2 or 3 of them. Very spotty memories of their own lives. I had one 15-year-old young lady that I worked with who had never seen a baby picture of herself ever. And she had been in care most of her life. And so I, again, as that bridge, was able to contact her birth mom and say, hey, I know visits can't happen right now for lots of different reasons, but can you send me some baby pictures? She sent me 200 pictures the next day that I was able to show to that young person, say, this is who you are. You were a lovable, gorgeous, amazing little baby that was deserving of everything, and really just watch that light bulb turn on in her mind to say, oh, wait, I was cute. Like she had this internal image that she wasn't lovable somehow, which just is so far from the truth. And so it's really just been a journey of understanding the importance of our history and our stories. Mm-hmm. And then how do we build that into foster care, where we know young people are, by the very nature of foster care, disconnected from the people who know those stories and who have that consistency of memory, because kids don't have that. Our kids' memories are jack, and we know that. So we need adults to help bring that consistency and that narration to the story. So that was a very long-winded way to say I have been on this journey a long time. And how do we capture the power of our individual stories and those around us?
Yes, wow. First, I want to say thank you for your work. Thank you for supporting youth and supporting the individuals in the foster care realm. And I say that, and I thank you, because it's a lot of work, and a lot of the stakeholders, a lot of the foster parents, a lot of the people don't get that thank you. And I recognize that work. So you went from a journey that you had with yourself to realizing that, and it's crazy because unless I'm misspeaking, you didn't have any connection to the foster care realm, but as a just individual out there in life, is like you recognize the importance of, I need to understand my story and some of the other people surrounding your story, to be able to piece together something that may help me in the future, and I think back to my own experience being an adult now, and I'm like, these are moments where you go to the doctor for a checkup. They ask you questions about what is your family history, and I'm like, well, I personally, being African American male, my go-to is like, well, I'm Black, so I'm pretty sure my family has probably had somewhere along the lines, most Black targeted diseases or health problems. So I just took off all the ones I know of that, but I don't know if that's true or not because I've never had a conversation with my birth family sitting down like, hey, what should I know? Like, what information, you know? And unfortunately, when things reconnected to a point where there was communication, at least with my mother had 5 strokes prior to that. So there was no way to be able to have a clear-cut conversation. And even prior to that, you know, my siblings, I don't think they even know fully. So it's for me, it's very important under at least even just for that piece, but even more so um, for the track of healing, you know, and also self-discovery, you know, and peace of mind. Um, but going back, because I'm rambling on, going back, um, I wanted to ask you, so you went from this experience in your younger age to journeying forward. What provoked you to want to foster? You know, for the people who are out there asking a question, they maybe went to a church service, they maybe met a friend and they're like, I think I want to do this, but I'm not so certain. What was your why in that?
You know, honestly, turning 30 was a milestone for me, like it is for a lot of people. And I was single, I was living with a bunch of roommates, had a house. And I was just like, I feel like I'm no judgment on other 30-year-olds who aren't there, but I felt like for myself, like I was like, I'm old enough that I need to have responsibility to people other than myself and my roommates, you know, and I knew that I was good with kids. I nannied most of my life. And I was like, why not just start the conversation and see where it goes? You know, you can always change directions, but you need to start moving. If you're interested in it, why not go to an information session? Why not talk to friends and family and say, hey, I'm considering this. What do you think about that? I knew as a single person, I thought I'd get a lot of resistance from family and friends. I thought people would say, oh, you're crazy. Like you're do the career path, you're young, you know, go date, you know, do something. But to a person, every single one of my friends and family were like, this is perfect for who you are and the journey you've been on, and why not check it out? So I went to an information session at my local county here in Minnesota, and I was licensed with kids in my home 4 months later. I think if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. Like I just kept taking one step after the other. And it was my why is to be responsible to people other than myself. And then I got into it and really found I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the process of getting to know family systems and getting to know new kids and saying, okay, what part of the healing can I be for this time when they're with me? Is it helping the parents figure out maybe how to parent differently in a more healthy way, you know, which I did a lot of in nannying? Or is it just to help kids say, okay, this is bedtime and wake up time and consistency and love and all of that? Each kiddo is different, but it was a really good fit for me for those years when I was doing it.
Definitely. So, you know, some of us may know, some of the people in the audience may not know. Yeah. Fostering is a huge job in itself. And I don't even want to use the word job. It is a huge duty to take on to a person's heart and what have you. And there's a lot of intricate moving points because you have youth that maybe just look, I'm here, I'm chilling, and you have youth that have deeply rooted trauma. So how in your experience, how did that those different experiences and having, different you, how did that help, and how did you approach that? With, some of the youth that may have had like deeply rooted trauma and you had to work with them a little bit more. So how did you deal with that?
Yeah, I think just acknowledging that every situation is different. There's no cookie cutter to how to be a foster parent, because
Right.
every single family is different. Every single kiddo who comes in your home is different. And so I think approaching it not as, you're entering my house, and so it's my rules or the highway, like let's come together, and our family, for as long as you're here, is going to look different. And so trying to get to know one another in an organic way. I think sometimes, I train foster parents and they're just like, oh, we're going to sit down, we're going to, go through all the rules, and we're going to assume X, Y, and Z. But getting to know, like, okay, kiddos, like what the simple things, like trying to figure out what kind of food the person coming into your home likes and trying to accommodate that, instead of saying, no, we eat dinner at 6 o'clock and this is what we eat, and my way or the highway. I had a home study that I was reviewing for an adoptive family. Hopefully they're not gonna listen to this. But they were like, we're vegetarians, which is fine. That's a life choice. And any kid who comes into our home, we understand that they might not be a vegetarian when they come, and that's fine. So we'll give them a week to adjust and become a vegetarian. And I was like, maybe not. Maybe we're just going to keep on moving, find another family who's a little more flexible, because you really need to be. You need to be able to rearrange your life and not just assume someone's going to instantly fit into yours.
Definitely. I love that. Here in the state of Michigan, I've been actively on panels and talking with foster parents and helping with training for adoptive and foster parents. And that point exactly has always came up, and I try to explain that, that same thing, like it's okay to have consistency and a structure in your home, but also you have to be open to the fact that the youth that you are bringing into your home are coming from a different reality, a different culture, most times, and a different lifestyle. And reality, is, most youth don't have the most healthiest thought process towards food. And that even is to the certain fact that they eat at a certain time. And like, from the time I've talked with parents, who have started fostering and stuff, they're like, yeah, brought people into my home and they didn't know what a dinner time was. It's just like when you hungry, go to the kitchen, or when, it's kind of like fending for yourself. But coming into that, I came to that same conclusion, and I started to speak like, you have to be open, and all that space for someone to be like, wow, this is why you guys do that, maybe I want to try to do that, but do not try to force that, because in my parents, and I'm going to use this reference because a lot of parents I've sat on panels and talked with and trainings had been faith-based. And I'm a Christian myself, and I'm like, okay, it's nice and all, but some of these youth have never been to church. Right. Some of these youth have no kind of no faith background at all. So it's nice to go to church, 4 or 5, 6 times a week. If that's your mission, but also right. Take it from the child's eyes. Never been to church.
Right.
And then they come into your home. Well,
I was trying to turn it. Yeah, no, like turn it around. Like, what if your Christian child went into a Muslim home and they wanted to go to mosque 5 days a week? How would you feel? How would your child adjust? To kind of bring that different lens. Like, yes, definitely. It's important to you, but it might not be important in the same way, or there might be baggage there from that kiddo's history around church. And so, yeah, being flexible is the
Definitely.
number one for foster parenting.
Definitely. And one of the biggest things I say for advice is, as a foster parent, even if the path is leading toward adoption, you are in a position of education and opening that person up to new experiences, not forcefully, or not, like this is what we do here, but, allowing that space for conversation and dialogue for them to make that choice,
Right.
And in my experience talking to other foster alumni, many of them saying like, well, I've been in this forceful situation and this is why I don't do this now. And I'm like, I hear them and I'm like, well, if they would have gave you an option or gave you space to decide, would you have felt better? And they were like, yeah, I like the foster home. I just didn't like that part of it, So to my foster parents and so forth like that, that may have dealt with that or felt some pushback, from my experience, that's what I've heard, so if that's helpful to any degree. But thank you for that. My next question is, you had talked about building relationships with some of the parents to be able to get information for these youth. How did you do that? Like, was there any pushback or any time with that? Like, just being very real, did anybody feel any type of way? Like,
Right.
Who is this lady talking to?
Well, I think when you're a foster parent, I think the system is set up to be adversarial with the birth parents, but I don't think it needs to be. I think as foster parents, we have the ability to advocate for it not to be adversarial in the way we approach things. In Minnesota, there was a new legislation just passed for comfort calls. So where within, I think it's 24 to 72 hours of kids being in a new home, the foster parent calls the birth parent and introduces themselves and said, hey, I'm taking care of little Johnny. What should I know about him? And that was something that I did way back when I was a foster parent. If you start out on the right footing to say, it is not me against you. I have no say in placement as a foster parent. I did not choose to remove your child from you. My only job is to keep them safe and to take care of them until you're able to again. And starting off on that foot can set up 99% of relationships to go so much better and so much with so much less adversarial nature, because even if it's moving towards adoption, until it does, that is their baby, that is their child. And as foster parents, they're going to know if you're not respecting that. But if you do respect that and say, hey, the county's doing their thing, the agency, the organization, they are doing their process for foster care. That's not my job. My job is to put him to bed tonight. Can you help me know how to do that better? What is, how do you want to be referred to? What do you want him to know? I always tried to do it same night. Kid came into care, have that conversation with birth parents. And I found the most common reaction was just relief and tears to say, I am absolutely not your enemy here. Like, I know this is the hardest day of your life. Like, your kids were just taken away from you. And I'm not judging. I'm just here to take care of them. Can you help me do that? And then once, we were able to connect as adults, letting them speak to their kid. Because I know as a parent, if there is something happening at my kid's school that's concerning, I can talk to the teacher and that's fine. But I want my baby on that phone so that I can hear that they're okay. I can hear that, they're in a house where there's a bed and there's pajamas for them. It's the basic things that as parents, if our kids, just being empathetic, I think as a foster parent is the biggest thing you can do to build a relationship with birth parents, to put yourself in their shoes and say, none of us are so fantastic that that couldn't be our story. Because I know as a mom, I yell at my kid, like I get loud. My neighbors could call, because we're parents, we're real people, and just because a kid's in foster care does not mean that birth parent is a monster. Most of the times, 90% of the times, kids were in my home, it was because of mental health issues of birth parents. It was because of drug addiction and poverty. None of those are monsters. There's some out there. There is some out there where it's like, okay, we're going to put up some extra security things, but most of the time they're just struggling and they're not able to be the parents that they need to be at that time. But if you start with empathy instead of judgment, the relationship is going to be different. So then when you say, hey, I'm going to send Johnny with a camera to take some pictures of you, I'm putting together this memory book for him. That's in no way threatening, because it's not me taking your kid. It's not me trying to crangle anything or work on the case or anything. And then when you say, hey, Johnny was telling me about, when he was 5 and this crazy thing happened with the bike, can you fill that in? Because it's not making any sense. You can understand their story in a natural way when you've built relationship. You have to be open to building relationship and not just taking care of kids. It's understanding the family.
Right. Oh man, that's so powerful. So powerful. And what I'm hearing is taking a step back, and being at an equal playing field with the parents, with the birth parents, recognizing that that's your mother, or that's your father. I'm here to help and support and provide a safe place for you. Even if adoption is there, like recognizing and acknowledging that is the person who brought them into the world. No matter what happens to transpire, being there as a foster parent to help support not just only the child, but support the parents and maybe guide, maybe mentor, maybe, be, a listening ear or whichever, or a resource, but also provide that space for healing and growth. And in my experience, just like you said, I've seen a lot of, because in child welfare, there's usually like abuse or neglect that they use that word, but neglect does not mean that there literally has been neglect. Maybe that can mean that there just wasn't the means to be able to provide. And I'm seeing that a lot, even coming out of the pandemic, that, situation happened with work, it could be a small situation where a bill was missed and the power was off, and conveniently somebody noticed, and now they have to, figure out a plan to be stable to get their kid back. Right. They have been an awesome parent all up into that, but that is the situation, or I would say another situation that maybe a little bit risque. You have, a mother or a father who had been in a domestic violence situation. And, either the mother or the father is trying to get away from their partner, and in some cases they have to take time to get themselves to a place of stability to provide a safe place for their child. There's many different situations where it isn't the parents being abusive to the kids. It's just life happening to the parents. And I think a lot of us fail to realize that everyone is human. Life happens. Like, in all aspect, if you were to lose your job and didn't have side hustles or whichever, you could be homeless.
Absolutely.
like that, everyone, and we live in a world where, there's like, either middle class or this class or whichever. And I'm like, that's unfortunately, even being a person that works multiple jobs myself, I still am not at that line, so if something was to happen, I don't have a backup plan, so I think about if I was a, parent, what happens to my kids,
Right.
so
Right.
unfortunately that's the narrative, and I know there's other different perspectives and stuff like that, but I just think it's important that we look at all aspects, and we change that stigma that this is why people are in foster care, or the kids are in foster care because they did something wrong, or the parents, that's not the truth. Take a step back, and talk to the people,
Yeah.
and most times or not, if they did something wrong, they will tell you, because
Right.
they're being treated as a human being, and it's a respect factor there, and I go back to my experience being in a homeless shelter, and I met so many different people. And I met people who ended up in situations where they're like, I messed up, I got hooked up on drugs, and slowly, surely, even though I went to college, had everything going for myself, I started to lose everything,
Right.
lost my family and stuff like that. And they have came back to a place where I realized that I needed to work on things to get back going. And then when I got to a place of working on things, try to reconnect with my children, reconnect with my family, and I remember a guy who was telling me, my marriage, I hurt my spouse. That probably never, but I think it's important for myself to be able to reconnect with my children for the sake of their life and their understanding, so you just never know. And I think that speaks to, your your organization, the power of the story. Understanding the whole, not just a half, because if you just got a half, that only speaks at a certain point.
Right.
And most youth in care, yeah, I know who my parent is. I know, that they're this color or that color, but that's not enough.
Right.
That's not enough. Or they have the one singular baby picture, or they only have the one thing, that carry them through the system. And unfortunately, in life, you run into situations when you get older where you're asked questions about, do you know any of your family mental health history? Do you know any of your family's medical health history? Going forward, and it's different aspects. And I just think about paperwork situations when it comes to government. I think about a situation if someone to go to be in the FBI, they have a long list of things they ask you about your family and stuff like that. Right. So I just think it's so important. And I remember telling you when I did your survey, my response was to prepare yourself. And for me, that was very short, but that spoke volumes, because when trying to get, for me, I got my case file, and when getting that, I learned a lot of things that was displeasing to me. I went through 5 different emotions at the same time. I was angry, frustrated, sad. I was confused. A lot of different emotions, and then I was like, but before that, I had braced myself. I had prepared myself, like, okay, you're gonna hear some things, because even throughout my experience, there was a lot of hearsay, there was a lot of pushing a narrative, about this or that, so I was like, I know that from just my actual experience and the actions that take place. So I need to prepare myself mentally for what I'm about to read, and what was what was written about me. And the hardest thing was reading what the caseworker said, because they, just very straight about it. Right. And for me, I went through the juvenile side, and then became a ward of the state, and became a dual ward, and then went into and then became a foster care youth, for foster care, switching. I may get these ones twisted, from Adhd A, Adhd E, which is switching from, reunification isn't going to happen or whichever. So we need to prepare for aging out, independent living, and what have you. So throughout that whole experience, I had been told things like, because on the juvenile side, I got to a point where I was a fighter to survive. I no longer allowed things to happen to me, and I was tired. So I read, that he's violent, all these different things. And I look back and I was like, I've never had any, at least in any residential setting, I've never had incidents. There may have been issues where I had tried to advocate for myself and I wasn't gonna let nobody tell, but I've never had incidents where, I had to be restrained or anything like that. So that was really hard for me to hear, because I was like, you described me as a black, as a violent criminal, and these are caseworkers that, you ain't got nobody else. You can't talk. I couldn't talk to my parents, and stuff like that. So this is a person I'm confiding in, and I'm telling all these truths about and stuff like that. And to hear that, I felt betrayed. That was my first instinct, and that made me angry with the system.
Right.
And then when I went to the foster care side, I read that part and I was like, wow, they really just did not listen to me at all. Like, they just was like, yeah, all right, this is what you want. Okay, no, we gonna go with this, and I just felt like, what was the point at that point, when I got to that part of the file. And I remember one distinct thing that helped me start the process of healing and working towards that was, I remember when they tried to get a hold of my dad, to see if he wanted to try to, take me in or do whichever or be a part. And I remember that it stated in my file that they had reached out to him via letter because they had tried all out of newspaper, because they had tried all ways, like calling old addresses or whatever, to get a hold of him. And I was like, they went to the extreme, because I don't, like, at first I don't know who reads newspapers anymore, but like I was just like, they went out to put it into the post to try to get a hold, get a hold of you, and then it was that. So for me, that started the process of like, I can't be waiting on that step anymore from my dad, and I can't be acting out because this person isn't here. So that made a personal thought in my life once I was able to read that, like, it's time for me to step up as a young man and as a man going forward, an adult. Like, I have to take personal responsibility for my actions and try to be the best that I could, at this. And that was, I think that was a big turning point for me. My mom, there was nothing she could do at that point. She had 5 strokes. She was paraplegic. Even though we have some discrepancies with our relationship, I had to take that for what it was. And for me, that was a big thing, to try to just heal and try to just grow from that. Like, we may not be able to have a full-fledged conversation of why this happened to me, or, why did you do this? But also, one thing that I did after getting my file is, there wasn't a lot for me to grasp or trace back, but I found a way to be able to go back and just look at the lineage. And I found that my family, the nurturing aspect, the support aspect wasn't there. And it was an ongoing cycle. And if I wasn't careful, when I create a family, when I decide to marry or whichever, I can continue that cycle, So I just wanted to share that, because that's why I believe getting the whole of your story, or getting, at least a portion to complete it mentally is helpful, because that started me to change the narrative for myself. That helped me realize that, okay, all right, you can't be just sabotaging relationships because you don't need people. Yes, you were hurt. Yes, you were traumatized, but you got, look, it's life now at this point. You either, keep it going and keep pushing. And I don't mean that to devalue or desensitize what has happened to people, but at some point, I had to put away my childish ways and step up to being a man, or being a person, being a human being in today's society. And it really struck to me that, I had a judge that told me I was a menace to society. So I was on a mission to prove her, like, look, I'm just not this crazy person. Like,
Right.
I can be a good citizen. So, but going back, that's why I think it's important, and I wanted to share that with you and share that with the listeners, because I think it's important that people understand from a person who's been through it, why,
Right. Right. Well, I think we need to understand how we fit in that larger narrative. Like if there's been generations of the same thing that you can say, okay, this is clearly something that my family has struggled with. And so I'm going to be proactive and I'm going to do what I need to do to stop that and to do something different. But if you're like caught up in this thing and you don't even fully understand it, then it's really hard to break free and to do something different. Or if you're, having all these feelings towards your birth parents, your birth grandparents, and then you understand their story, like they grew up in foster care and they were in 30 different placements and they had all these terrible things happen. So their parenting was out of their trauma. And then you can say, okay, yep, I've still got a lot of problems with them. And yep, they maybe still are not safe people in my life, but I understand where they're coming from. And it's not because I'm a bad kid. It's not because I am somehow not able to fit. It's not about me. It's about this larger story that I'm a part of. And you're right. It's so important. And, a lot of young people kind of, get that larger story when they request their file from the county. And we know that workers are overworked and they're busy and they are just doing their court reports because they're required, without always thinking about the fact that the young person they're writing the court report about can read this someday. And being called all kinds of different things without cause is hurtful and is traumatic, without understanding, like, yes, maybe I sounded violent or I looked like X, Y, or Z, but it was coming from this place that was so far from violence. And if they would have just added in a couple more sentences to be like, hey, there's a lot going on in this young man's situation, and here's what it looks like, here's what it sounds like, instead of just slapping labels on it, how much more strength-based would that be to read, to be like, oh yeah, those are really hard years. I was going through a lot and it came out sideways and here's why, instead of like, I'm not X, Y, or Z, or I am X, Y, or Z. Like, just state the facts, man. Like, what is actually looking and sounding and what is the context? It changes things. It changes how we can frame up where we've been.
Definitely. And that brings me to my next question.
Absolutely.
As we get ready to, end, COVID happened. It has been an experience, but also before I get into that question or that component, you may segue into that with this question. Mental health. We know that there's a lot of stigma and labels surrounding it, and not even just in the foster care realm, just as a whole in society. What did that look like for yourself growing up versus now? Like, was it important to you? Like, what was there barriers? And I know now, you probably got a self-care routine and everything. So, like, what did that look like for yourself versus getting into this arena and like, okay, mental health is a thing. Like, I gotta, and I'm gonna be having to support youth with their mental health journey too. So, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 42. So I was, in my growing up years, it was definitely not talked about. It was, nobody was diagnosed with anything and nobody got help with anything. You just kind of did your best to do the day-to-day. I'm 100% sure I have ADHD, and I struggled all throughout school. And I, learned the skills that were necessary to get through through life, but struggled. And now, my younger daughter, has similar things. And now I can say, okay, what medications are helpful? And I can see her thrive and not be frustrated with life. And I am a huge proponent of, if there is something out there that can make you be able to live your life better, why not? If it's a massage, if it's a medication, if it's therapy, do what you need to do, because it's all about getting to the place where you can live your best life and have good relationships. And there's absolutely no stigma in it. Everyone I know right now has their own therapist and has whatever medication helps their brain do what it needs to do in the best way possible. And I think COVID has showed us, like, you need to do what's best for you and what's best for your family, and to put your stake in the sand and say, this is what's right for me. And this is what's right for my family, and not being ashamed of that. I think for so long, we've just had so much shame and being like, I need to do things differently than you. And we all do. We all have unique brains, and we all have unique processes, and we've all always needed to be different than our neighbors. But just having the freedom to be like, hey, like, I need to go to bed early if I'm going to be my best self. And that's not because I'm weak. It's not because I'm tired. It's just who I am. And live it, like, being proud of it, and just feeling like, what are you doing to live your best life? Because we all deserve to be as healthy as we can. And with COVID, whether that's staying home at this point in time and still being very cautious, still doing masks, still doing everything, or whether that's getting out there and dropping some of those things for your mental health, like, whichever one, do your thing and make your own decisions. We're all grown people, and we all get to decide what's best for us. And I'm really excited we're at that point in the pandemic to say, there's options available, for vaccines and things for people who want it, and people who don't need to do it. And we can all kind of decide what's best for us. And we've learned how to respect one another, I think, in a big way, to say what's best for you. Even having the conversation, like, are we going to meet inside or outside? Do you want to do masks or no masks? Like, we were never forced to be as aware of other people's boundaries as we have during COVID. And I think it's a gift that we can bring into other avenues. Like, what are you comfortable with? And having that not be an awkward conversation, it's a normal everyday part of life now. So I think that's a benefit.
Right. I love that, being in a space to ask the hard questions about boundaries. It is not awkward, and I was like, my age, but like dating, like, I can now, like, hey, you want to be outside, you want to go to the park,
Right.
that, when there was, before COVID, like doing studies, dogs, other different things and stuff like that, being in college, it's a whole awkward conversation, like, just pick a place,
Right,
now
right.
it's like, we, as a young adult, it's a space where it's like, I respect that, and what would you like, and being mindful of each other. And I think the approach, to health, to people's boundaries, and mental health has been completely highlighted, like you said. My next question is, what's next for yourself? What's next for power of the story?
Yes. So we actually just are announcing today, we just got our license for Minnesota, so we can officially do this work. DHS signed off on our license. So it's kind of funny. We're the first child placing agency licensed in 20 years in Minnesota.
Awesome.
And we won't be placing children. So it's kind of funny. Like, we have this categorization of a child placing agency, but we're not placing kids. But we have kind of done all of the background pieces to be able to be contacting birth families and be interviewing youth and really in there and doing it with the sign off of Minnesota. And so we're really excited to be in this space of launching and, working with counties and families and youth to really harness the power of young people's stories and capturing it in this moment of time when we can. I know that you shared in your story, like your mom is now not able to share that information. What would it have meant to have people in there at the point when you were in care to say, hey, what's the story here? What medical information can you share? Trying to anticipate the young person's questions as they age. At 2, you're not going to have a whole lot of questions, but at 20, you will. And so as professionals, as Power of Story, we get to get in there sooner in the process and ask those questions with that now 2, but will grow young person in mind to capture their story, whether that's in pictures or information or history, like putting it all in one place and capturing it for them, to be added to as they grow. Because we know that none of us are one story or one snapshot in time, and we change and we evolve, and our families change and evolve over time. And so just prioritizing that in the space and having conversations like this about the Power Story to help foster parents understand their importance and their role in capturing this. And even if it's not an organization coming in and doing a life book or doing a social medical history, as a foster parent, Google life books for kids in foster care. There's a million resources out there, but you just have to do the work and have to gather the information and have the conversations and write them down and then pass it along with the young person when they leave your home. They will save it. It will impact them. My biggest recommendation, if you are a foster parent, give one to the kid themselves to take with them, and then give one to the county, because kids lose stuff, especially if they're not landing in their permanent home. You want it there when they ask for it, when they're like starting to ask the questions, that it's there on file at the county along with them in person. So do the work, capture the story, because it is more impactful than you will ever know.
Definitely. Lastly, what tips and tidbits do you have I know you've been in many different capacities, so I'm going to say, what tips and tidbits do you have for the people who are working, to train and support, these parents or workers? Also, what tips and tidbits do you have for those youth, and lastly, what tips and tidbits do you have for people who are looking to build organizations and what have you to support youth?
My advice to youth is just know how important your story is. It is not optional. It is not cotton candy. If someone's saying, oh, you don't need to see your file, it's fine. It's just you were there. You don't really need to know. Or if people are saying, oh, your birth family is jacked up, so don't worry about understanding them, like you've been adopted now, or you've aged out, like move on, move forward, to say your story is important. And if you want to know it, it is your right to access that information, and ask until they get it to you. Our system is broken, and getting your file can be really, really hard. But if you want it, it is your right to have it. So be persistent, keep asking. I'm doing what I can to make this process easier, but right now it's just persistence, and keep asking for it because it's valuable and it's yours. Even if it comes out sideways, even if the workers sometimes get it wrong, it's still your information. So if you want it, keep asking and get it. To workers, I would say write your documents, knowing that young people are going to read them one day. We all, as workers, we're making the case for services most of the time. So we're making the case that a kid needs to be in residential. We're making the case that parental rights need to be terminated. We're making the case that they are not able to go home and be safe yet. And so a lot of that negative language naturally is there because you're making the case that X, Y, or Z needs to happen. For school services, you're making the case that they're struggling so bad that they need extra services. You can make the case in a way that doesn't shame the entire family system. You can say, hey, this kid is struggling hardcore. This is what it looks like. This is what it sounds like. And this is maybe why. I think when we neglect to put in that why piece, it's very disjointed and it comes out very sideways. So do things with the young person in mind and not the young person today, not that 5-year-old or that 8-year-old sitting in front of you, but think of them 20 years from now, reading this document. How does it shine light on their family? How does it shine light on them? Would you want to read that written about your life? And if not, how can you write it so that it remains truthful and strength-based at the same time? And then I think to organizations that are looking to build in this space, don't do anything until you talk to the people who are most impacted by what you want to do. So if you are building an organization for foster parents, you need to talk to foster parents before you do anything. If you're building an organization that's for youth, you need to talk to them before you do anything. Same thing, birth parents, adoptive parents. You have to understand the people you want to serve before you build a model for service. And it's like, well, of course, that's what you need to do, but you need to do it. Like you need to build based on what you're hearing instead of the other way around. And so just keep youth voice at the table always. If you're building an organization, to say what is important, what is valuable, what is missing, and not duplicating things that are already happening. I know we were just licensed as a child placing agency, but we don't need more child placing agencies. We need people who are filling in those gaps. And I'm sure that's what Power of Story is going to do. We don't want to duplicate what's already out there. We want to change it and make it better and be the change that we want to see and that we need in this space. And so if you're going to build it for something that doesn't exist with those you're wanting to serve at the table at all times.
Definitely. It has been an honor and pleasure having you here. And I look forward to seeing the journey that your organization continues on and the change from it. It has already impacted me, and I'm pretty sure it has impacted others, and it's meaningful. Too many times as a youth, and I'm gonna say this, objectively, as a human being, you're told that your voice does not matter. Mm-hmm. And even so, to a point of traumatizing for foster youth, so to be reinforced, through a timeline and papers and history that my story matters, and it matters to the point that someone wants to help me capture it. Someone wants to help me maintain the integrity of it, and know that, at some point, maybe not now because I'm a child, right. At some point I'm going to want to know this information in its entirety, so I can, to a sense, for some people, be whole, right. It may not be specifically about like wanting to know it for whichever reason. I know we all have our different reasons, but to essentially like to be whole, like to reference back. And like I said before, there's many different reasons why having your file is important. In a daunting sense, being able to answer those hard questions when you get asked, but also having a peace of mind, because I know in some sense there's people that's like, I didn't know my parents fought that hard, I didn't know my caseworker really cared that much.
Right.
I didn't know my judge did that for me. Like you just never know. But I also say, as I said before, prepare yourself. And I take that approach not just in the sense of this, but in life. As youth, and as alumni that may be listening, you have been through something, but it does not have to be the entirety of the rest of your life. Take everything that you're hearing in, but also know that you have the choice to take it at a grain of salt. You can leave it at the door. And eventually everything that you're hearing, everything that you're doing and stuff like that does make a loaf of bread. And what you make out of that loaf, whether it be a sandwich, whether it be some French toast, or whichever, it is up to you. But know that every action, everything that comes out of your mouth matters, and it's important. And you are valued, and you are worthy, and you are valid. With that being said, it has been an honor, and I appreciate it, and I look forward to continue to connect with you and supporting what you're doing. Right before we get ready to end, how can listeners get in touch, learn more, or connect with you?
Yeah, well, you can always come to our website. It's powerofstory.us or .us. And all the information on what we're doing is on there. There's also some opportunities to attend an information session with me if you want to learn more about Power of Story, or join our website, or join our mailing list. But yeah, I'd love to stay in touch with people. I think this idea of the Power of Story is something that we know is lacking, not just in Minnesota, but that it's lacking from the national conversation. And so I welcome conversations with folks about how we can help elevate the conversation where you're from, or partnering with different organizations. So yeah, absolutely reach out. I would love to talk to anyone who's interested in learning more. And this has been a joy, Michael. It's been so fun. And I thank you for the opportunity to come out and talk today.
No problem. Yes. This has been so awesome. And, episode 39, I just want to say it is a privilege to be able to do this. And I stated before on my podcast that, when I started this, I didn't know where it was really going to go. I just knew I had this concept of what I wanted to do. And, I'm a person of faith. I've been praying, and I've been doing the work, and I'm like, this is something that I'm looking to build upon and grow, and not just only do this podcast, but get out into the neighborhoods that are affected to educate. So stay tuned for that. I'm looking to bring the conversation as COVID has been calming down, looking to bring the conversation in person to those communities of Black and Brown and disproportionate families, to be able to help in the prevention aspect of education, and switching that narrative that, human services agencies are against, to be able to bring the communities and the services together to be able to support people, because what I see as a crisis, and a crisis that's been happening for years, and a breakdown in communication. So I want to be able to use this place, not only to share those voices and those experiences and those truths, but also to educate, and help invoke reform and changes. So that's what I'm here for. This is what I feel like I'm called to do, and I hope that you guys that are listening continue to support me in this aspect and maybe join me, but thank you. This has been Resilient Voices and Beyond. I say this spiel every time. COVID is out there. It is doing its thing. Stay safe. If you're thinking about getting vaccinated, do it. Do your homework, go to informational session, whatever. If it's not for you, not gonna get political. That's your choice. It is your right. Just make sure that either you get vaccinated or not get vaccinated, that you're taking care of yourself. And I have said this before. The protocols that we have been told from COVID aren't new. Because these are things that were mentioned to us and recommended from the CDC when we get colds and flus for years. Like, wear a mask, make sure you sanitize and wash your hands. It's just been highlighted in a sense because there has been a global pandemic, So make sure that you recognize that these practices, are to ensure the safety of yourself and your village, and it just takes one person to, do what they need to do, and it helps 10 people that you maybe encounter in that day. So, just, take that as you will. You can leave it at the door, whatever. That's my little spiel. But thank you guys for supporting me. I encourage you guys, as I have people on these episodes, that you go check them out, go support them, go go look at what they're doing, and do some thinking. I think a lot of people I've had on here do a lot of different things. They involve many different conversations and so forth. And one of the other reasons why I brought this on is to start those conversations and dialogues with self and with families, so while you're listening to these episodes, go have the conversation with a friend, like, hey, I heard about this, or go have a conversation with a coworker, and just like, what do you think about this? I just think we need to make that a practice, to open dialogue and conversation about these sometimes difficult or hard spaces. But I hope you guys go in peace. Have a good night. Have a good morning. Have a good whenever you're listening to this. And this has been Resilient Voices and Beyond. Thank you.